Welcome. I see we have some people who are starting to join us. While we're waiting to get started, why don't you let us know where you're from? Ooh, San Antonio's in the house.
I've always wanted to go to the Riverwalk.
Same. I've been to Dallas a few times, just not San Antonio.
Nope, never done San Antonio Riverwalk. Way on my list to do. So much to do on our list locally. You do? You like it? You moved here a year ago. From where? And you love it. Is it really that hot though in San Antonio? My girlfriend lives there. Yeah, Nashville's pretty sweet. Nashville gets surprisingly, I was surprised how cold the winters got in Nashville.
Okay. Welcome everybody. We're glad you joined us tonight. We're going to be visiting the Galapagos Islands with Jennifer Reynolds. For those of you that were with us for our Antarctica presentation, you've already gotten a taste of Jennifer's storytelling. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I definitely have Antarctica on my bucket list after that presentation. To get started, I'm going to I need to share my screen. You can tell I'm not usually the one who's starting with this. All right. Again, we're going to the Galapagos Islands. And just to give you a little bit of background on how this started, we're a group of travel agents who, once COVID hit, decided we had to do something to help to stop us staring at our same four walls or turning on the news and hearing all the information about COVID. It's just not healthy. So the best way to do that is to take you on vacation. And if this is your first time with us, welcome. I'm Maria Stephanopoulos with Ingenious Travel. I'm based in Tampa, Florida. Not with us tonight is Susan Schaefer with Ships and Trips Travel from the Nashville, Tennessee area. Same thing with Barbara Oliver with All Together Now Travel, who's out in California, along with Gail Sherman with Wine Lovers Travel. And we have Candace Stearns here with us tonight from Stay Balanced Travel. And then how you can find us. We welcome all of you to join our Facebook page, Facebook group, actually, Take a Virtual Vacation. That's where you can find our upcoming calendar of events along with our recorded events, as all of these are recorded and stored in the unit section. You can also find us on our YouTube channel. For those of you in the greater Tampa Bay area, I welcome you to join me with Meetup for Eat, Drink, Travel, Greater Tampa Bay. For those of you in Nashville, Eat, Drink, Travel for Middle Tennessee. And those of you in Detroit, Eat, Drink, Travel Detroit with Candace. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Reynolds so she can take us on our fantastic trip to the Galapagos Islands.
Yes, well, fasten your seatbelts, everybody. Let me get this open and big screen. Will you confirm with me, girls, that you can see to travel is to live?
Yep, you're all set.
Yeah, well, I just don't know it to be any other way, but my name is Jennifer Reynolds. I've been in the travel industry all of my life. I was born and raised in Canada, just outside of Toronto, very close to Niagara Falls, but I've been in the travel industry all my life. I left Canada when I was in my early 20s. I worked for a Canadian tour operator abroad for many years. I worked and lived on cruise ships for over 18 years, running shore excursions, and there was one of my photographs from one of my years as shore excursion manager on board the Silver Cloud. I have a really big passion for history and geography. My first husband was a juggler unicyclist. I moved up the food chain with the second one, who was an oceanographer, and developed a rather significant passion for history and geography and really got into traveling. And last year in December was my 7th continent. I hit Antarctica, for those of you who may have been with me in my other presentation. But tonight, I want to take you to South America. I'm exceedingly passionate about South America. Very, very well traveled here, not only on cruise ships, but from traveling on my own. It is such a massive continent. Tonight, we're going to focus on Ecuador and frankly the Galapagos Islands themselves, which are an archipelago right off the coast. Peru is going to come at a later date, but I want you to look at that map on the left-hand side, that yellow piece called Ecuador, which is the equator. That's right where the equator in South America, where it goes through. You see the Andes Mountains that go through the country of Ecuador. You need to understand the geography of the country, and then we're going to move out to the islands themselves because it's really very easy. The country of Ecuador is exceedingly easy to get to. You got the coastal regions, and some cruise ships call into those coastal ports. You've got the Andes Mountains through the middle where Quito, the capital, is. It's the city of eternal spring. And if you look over to the right-hand side, you have the Amazon, which is the Ecuadorian Amazon, just south of the equator. These are the rivers that actually feed into the mighty Amazon River that makes its way through Brazil. The islands of the Galapagos are actually 500 miles off of the coast of Ecuador. The equator does run through the islands themselves. First thing people will always say is there a bad time of year to get there? And the answer is no. There's just busier times of year when you're on the equator. You know, the equation's sort of taken away from you in terms of your seasons, but we'll talk about that as we go through further. I'm a bit of a map junkie, and if you look at the country of Ecuador, you see the country of Quito, the capital of Quito. Looking down to the coast is Guayaquil. It's really important you understand these two places because it's really 9 times out of 10, if you're going to go to the Galapagos, you're going to do Quito and Guayaquil. Most international flights will bring you into Quito. You'll overnight for a night or two. Pick up a flight in Quito, go to Guayaquil where your plane will touch down, refuel, provision, fly to the Galapagos Islands, drop you off, pick up a whole bunch more passengers and come back to Guayaquil again. They're not going to refuel in the Galapagos. That archipelago, we're going to look at that a little bit further. Again, 500 miles off the coast. But here is Quito, one of my favorite places in all of South America. I really suggest you tack on an extra day or two to come into the city. Most flights are going to bring you into Quito. There's some now that go to Guayaquil, but most will bring you into Quito. It is the city of eternal spring. It is at about 6,000 feet of altitude, never too hot, never too cool, often very cloudy, and it is just north of Quito, where the equator runs through. Here are some of the markets. One of the few places in the world where you actually can cross the equator. You can straddle the equator here. And I want you to look at these markets because throughout South America, despite the fact that that says FCB Barcelona, you are looking at a typical Andean, a typical South American market. This could be Peru, it could be Ecuador, it could be Belize. These are the colors, the people, the cultures. This is why this place is so stinking awesome. The food's incredible, the hotels are nice. And it's also why you use a travel professional because they'll be able to hook you up. Whether you want to go to the Amazon, there's some crackerjack Raleigh chateaus and spas that are here. You can do some hiking. There is Mite del Mundo, which literally is the middle of the world. That is the equator in Ecuador. It is a volcanic country, and that is also going to play when we get out to the Galapagos Islands because they too are volcanic in origin, and that's what makes them so unique. But what I always found very amusing is that Panama hats don't come from Panama. Panama hats come from a magnificent city in southern Ecuador called Cuenca. So if you ever pick up a Panama hat, it comes from the country of Ecuador. We'll look at the Amazon another time, but that is an option for something that you can do. But for now, we fly into Quito. We spend a bit of time. We jump on a flight in Quito, touchdown in Guayaquil, and then we fly out to the Galapagos Islands. The flight is only a couple of hours. It's not a big deal. This is what you are going to be looking at when you look at the archipelago themselves. Wolf Volcano, Darwin Volcano, and yes, my friends, these are active volcanoes. There are a couple of spots where people live, and we'll go through that, primarily Puerto Ayora, if you look right in there in the middle of the island of Santa Cruz, and that's where the primary airport you'll find, which is on the island of Baltra. And no, it's not a dinky little plane you're taking over there, it's a big jet. A 727 is usually 137, 140 passengers going over. Same amount coming back. Remember, they don't fuel out in the Galapagos. It is picked up, they refuel in the mainland, go out to the Galapagos and come back again. The reason this airport even exists, I find completely fascinating, is because of the Panama Canal. And why? Because in 1914, when the Panama Canal was being constructed and opened, there was concern. And what happened when the Panama Canal opened? What broke out? The war. So what did the United States do? They needed to protect their interests in the Panama Canal, and they built a military base on the Galapagos Islands in a place called Baltra. And today you have the opportunity to land on your plane in Baltra simply because the US built that military base and that airport there. A satellite view. I'm obsessed with maps. I make no apology for it. Those are volcanoes that you are looking at, the islands of Fernandina, and these will become recognizable as you look at the different topographies. This would be your welcome to the Galapagos, the airport. You'll jump on transportation. It's going to take you over to where your boat's going to be located. And there's a lot of choices of boats. But let me tell you, animals are king in this place. And if you thought about sitting down and having a rest, well, you're just going to have to wait until those guys move out of your way. But big ship, small ship, let's put it in perspective. In the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador, you must have cupos or licenses in order to be able to go or land on the islands. Those cupos or licenses are held by particular companies. No ships larger than 96 passengers are allowed to operate in the archipelago. In general, what you'll find is groups of 8, a vessel that will hold 8, 16, 32, 48, and you can do the math until you get to 96. But by law, you are going to have 1 naturalist guide per 16 people. So let's put it in perspective. The Evolution there has 48 passengers on board. She's considered to be a mid-sized vessel. Something with 96 passengers, if you were likening that to a market in the Caribbean, that would be like the Oasis of the Seas. And that's why you talk to your travel pros here. Do you want big? Do you want small? Do you want a charter? Do you want to travel with all Americans, with Canadians? The opportunities are absolutely endless, but this is how you're going to be going ashore. And every one of these photographs that you see are mine, by the way. You can see that was taken in 2001. I did 5 trips to the Galapagos Islands. That's the Lammerlaw in the background, 16 passengers. She was a catamaran that also did dive trips as well. Your Zodiacs, when you go ashore, you'll have a maximum of 16 people. You'll always be wearing life jackets when you go ashore. These guys are just getting ready to go ashore, but there's no landing strips. There's no platforms for you to get onto. You got to be pretty sure-footed. It is not a wheelchair-friendly place. This is a national park. 98% of it is uninhabited. And from here, you're looking at world-famous Pinnacle Rock, and I'll show you another image of that in a moment. And that actually is another island in the distance, if you can imagine. And if you look over to the right off of Pinnacle Rock, an exquisite place to snorkel. The water's cold. The Humboldt Current comes up from the Antarctic here. But if you look at that beach over on the left-hand side, well, you think you might be able to dive in and have a swim. It's not possible because it's one of the largest nesting areas for birds in the archipelago itself. This is kind of the way it rolls. This is what the trails are going to be looking like, the rocks. You wait for the sea lions to get out of the way, and those are marine iguanas you see at the bottom. Turtles and tortoises. Remember, tortoises are on land. Turtles you are going to see in the water. And it's not uncommon at all to be approached by the wildlife. They don't know who you are. You're just there. You don't approach them. You sit, you wait. Sometimes exquisite experiences will happen. You won't be harmed. But you don't approach the wildlife, and they will look after things just magically well for you. There is a penguin here in the Galapagos on the equator. Who would have thought? It is called the Galapagos penguin, a small little critter. It's said that he rode up here from the Antarctic on the Humboldt Current, and while you're snorkeling in the water, you can see the penguin. And snorkeling is very common, as is kayaking. Again, it depends on your vessel. It depends on the caliber that you're going on. Are you on a sailing vessel? Are you on a motor vessel? A 4-day itinerary, a 5-day itinerary, a 7-day itinerary. Some of them do include opportunities to stay in small little motels, and I'll show you that in Puerto Ayora. But it doesn't matter what you choose to do. You're going to see the blue-footed boobies and the red-footed boobies. The red-footed boobies nest on the ground. You see them with their eggs. And if you're not catching them during the season when you're laying their eggs, you're catching them when they're hatching. There seriously is not a bad time of the year to go here. It tends to be very busy during the summer season, June, July, and August, when kids are typically out of school. December over Christmas and Thanksgiving tend to be very busy as well, but there isn't a bad time to go here. What I can tell you is that the currents and the waters are fairly chilly. Most vessels will also provide wetsuits. You only need a little shorty if you're really so inclined. But every different island you go to in the archipelago, if you can imagine, all of the bird species have evolved differently. And why? Because on some islands, it took more effort for some of the birds to get some of the berries and seeds out of the trees. And so their beaks may be sharper, they may be hooked, they may be softer. And this is the land of Darwin. It's also the land of evolution. June 3rd, 2001, that marine iguana, one of the most prehistoric creatures. And well, frankly, I like to say to people, I consider you a traveler once you've been snorted on in the Galapagos Islands by one of the marine iguanas. Ironically, they feed on seaweed in the ocean. And ironically, the seaweed, the salt water, is toxic to them. So while they ingest it, they have an ability to be able to excrete the toxins out of their nostrils. And it's not uncommon to get nailed while you may be sitting there watching these guys at some point in time. You could be snorkeling and they will go by you, but yes, these are some of the largest prehistoric creatures. I look at this photo and I could almost burst into tears because I think of the people and the beaches and the animals and the memories and the sunsets and the hikes, the experiences that we had. If you look back to this picture, where is this dude? Oh, he's in the back row in his stand right there. Okay, see the girl in the middle with the pink shirt with the glasses. Look to her left. There's a guy sort of sticking his head over with a mustache. That was his feet. Less than 13 minutes later. And he's like, what do I do? And Bowley said, just stand there. He'll move eventually. And that sea lion was asleep on his feet. And we just all stood around and waited until the sea lion moved. It's places like this where you can jump into the zodiacs, where you might just do a cruise around, or you'll get in the water and do a snorkel. There are diving opportunities as well, but the diving's difficult here. The water's cold when you get down 30 to 40 feet. The currents are quite strong, and frankly, unless you're a die-hard diver, you'll see more than enough pottering around on the surface, watching these little guys dodge you. This is where you can see a Sally Lightfoot crab. This is some of his scenery, and I love this photo because it is the frigate bird, and that is the male frigate bird. You know, Mother Nature, I'm never sure if it's ironic or unkind. But the male frigate bird, I guess he's making up for something, but in order to get attention, what he does is inflates that pouch he has on his neck. And it gets bigger and bigger, and he warbles and makes these incredible sounds to attract the females. Once he attracts a female and has a mate, the son of a gun deflates his pouch, and that's the end of it. But that's how they go about mating, and you can see that whole ritual, not just once, but twice, but 3 times, and 4 times, and 5 times, and frigate birds at the sunset, and blue-footed boobies, and marine iguanas, and turtles, and tortoises, and cute little birds that are just fledgling out of the nest. And yes, wherever you see white, that's called guano. And that blue-footed booby right there. And you find them in other places as well, but I love this shot because we have one of the pigeons, or one of the gulls, forgive me, a Sally Lightfoot crab in the background, and those ever-present sea lions. Now, in some of the landings, there are spots where some staircases have been put up to help you do some walking. But for the most part, this is what you're looking at. You don't want to lose your footing on a rock and scrape yourself. I beg people not to wear Tevas and open shoes, wear decent shoes. Also love to see it covered from top to bottom, slip, slap, slop. As they say in Australia, you need a hat, you need sunscreen. You're still on the equator. But neat places like Puerto Ayora and Santa Cruz is also another small little town. Well, not so small anymore, population's closer to 30,000, but here in Puerto Ayora is the home of the Charles Darwin Research Station. This is what the town would look like. Magnificent little spot. And on my first visits here, we didn't have internet. We needed a satellite communication, believe it or not. And this was just in 2000, not that long ago. But this is what Puerto Ayora will look like. There are small little hotels and motels you can stay in. There's a golf course now. It's grown up over the last number of years. I'm super glad I got to see it when I did, before she got a little bit more mature. But it is an exquisite experience, and visiting the Charles Darwin Research Station is certainly a highlight. It's easy, within walking distance right there in Puerto Ayora. They got a ton of stuff online as well. Often you can see some of their cameras that they've got. And the quantity of success stories that the research station has had, where tortoises from the island of Pinta, for example, when it was thought that these were the last tortoises of that island, were brought, eggs were incubated, and they have had extremely successful breeding programs. And Lonesome George, unfortunately, he's not around anymore, but I strongly suggest you read the story about Lonesome George. And going up into the highlands, oh gosh, I just remember Bob so well. There we were in the highlands. This was Divine's farm. If we saw one of these critters, we saw 21 of them. And when these land tortoises don't want to look at you, they drop down onto the grass and they suck in their neck and their legs. And I'm telling you, when you approach them, it's like looking at a Volkswagen. People have lived here over the years. Bowley, I love these two guys. Bowley on the left, and I don't know, Alex on the right-hand side. Do you know those two guys are still guides in the Galapagos Islands today? And that photograph was taken with them at Post Office Bay in 2000. Yes, there are people who have over the years who have attempted to settle here. Captain Porter came through here. In fact, Captain Porter is credited with having let goats go on the islands, which then ate their way through and bred like crazy. And a number of years ago, Australian sharpshooters had to be brought in order to kill the goats because they were now overrunning the islands. But if you follow me on my Facebook page, Jennifer Reynolds Travels, there is a really interesting situation that's happening in the Galapagos right now that you should be aware of. There's a Japanese fishing fleet right on the edge of the national park, right on the edge of where they're not allowed to fish anymore. And if you look at the history of the Chinese and you look at the history of the Asians and this archipelago, it's an ugly one. Many fishing fleets, particularly from Asia, have come here over the years. They have hunted sea lions for their penises. They have hunted whales for their fins, and all of it goes back into aphrodisiacs, where someone, also sea cucumbers is also another very large nutrient of the ocean. And in fact, right now, Galapagos is getting quite a bit of attention. There is an armada of fishing ships, vessels right now. Some of them are likely long lining into the Galapagos now, into the national parks itself. Watch the story. It's really critical you watch it and know what's going on. If you see Baltra there on the map above the island of Santa Cruz, Baltra is where the one main airport is. That's the one that the Americans built. Santa Cruz is the main island, Puerto Vallarta, right down there on the bottom, where Charles Darwin Research Station is. But now there's other places. For example, over on San Cristobal, there is some small settlements as well. But if you look at the island of Isabella to your left in Fernandina, there was recently some volcanic activity. And in fact, it looks like a seahorse. And that was one of the earlier images I showed you when we first started looking here from the sky. And there's Darwin and Wolf in the upper northwest part of the archipelago. Don't mistake how far out those guys are. Those are diving islands, some of the best diving for hammerhead sharks in the world is up at Darwin and Wolf. And yes, you might see some hammerhead sharks in amongst the other islands as well. And if you're snorkeling, when you see a hammerhead shark, in all likelihood, you will gulp deeply and marvel at the magnificence of Mother Nature. But this is the archipelago of the islands. You can do a week, 4 days, 3 days. You can stay a bit on the islands. You can go further out. There's a myriad of ways you can do it, but this is a place, as my mother would say, pay peanuts, get monkeys. You get what you pay for. There's a difference between a steak at the Golden Corral and at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. And there are some great options here in the islands, but not all of them are brand names. They're not. There's some other small, really great operators, and that's why you talk to our travel pros, because they know what's going on. If you want to do some follow-up here, The Galapagos Affair in 2013 was a magnificent movie starring Kate Blanchett. It's actually the story, a phenomenally interesting true story on Floriana in the 1930s about a dentist from Germany who settled the islands with his girlfriend, Dory. In came another woman who was extremely eccentric, who ultimately was murdered. So there's some really neat stuff, The Galapagos Affair. So you may want to take a look at that, starring Kate Blanchett. Kate Blanchett, by the way, also starred in Where'd You Go, Bernadette, which had some magnificent scenery down in Antarctica. So we just took a look at a slight little portion of the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador and what that has to offer you. 500 miles off the coast of Ecuador, out in the Pacific Islands, in the Pacific Ocean. Some folks will go down and do just the Galapagos Islands themselves, but most will combine something else. Quite possibly the country of Peru. This is Lima that you are looking at, Lima, Peru. Another magnificent colonial city that has the Spanish influence all over it. The Nazca lines where you can take a flight. The Islas Baístas, which are called the Galapagos Islands of Peru. And then up into the Andes Mountains and Cusco. And in a couple of weeks, this is where our next journey is going to take us, into the Lima area, into Cusco, and all the way up to the Sacred Valley and Machu Picchu. And that's the train that will take you up to Machu Picchu. So it's not uncommon at all for folks to spend a week here and a week in the Galapagos Islands. If you're considering even more time, and we'll look at that in a couple of weeks, you can get down to the islands in Peru of Lake Titicaca here, the Reed Islands, and again, we'll look at those in a couple of weeks. And this photograph means a tremendous amount to me as I look at these women, and I look at that beautiful piece of artwork on the blue on the left-hand side. And I look at that same piece of art, and I took that photograph 30 minutes ago or an hour ago on the wall of my bedroom here at home. So it just goes to show how exquisite these pieces of work are, how the magnificence of travel spills over from these experiences into our everyday life. So today we had a chance to go to the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador. We've traveled together to Antarctica. I think some of you have likely traveled virtually with our friends here to some other magnificent places in the world. But thank you for coming to Galapagos with me tonight. I invite you in 2 weeks from tonight to come back and join me when we will be taking a look at Peru and Machu Picchu. Maria, I'll turn it back over to you and see if there's any questions.
Thank you so much for that, Jennifer. That was, as usual, amazing. Absolutely amazing.
If you try to sit with the seals, well, I'm going to try to pick up some of those questions here. And sometimes I'm able to read those chats, and sometimes I'm able to read some of your questions as you go through, and I can incorporate it. But other times I get so wrapped up in what I'm talking about here. It's not really a matter of sitting down with the animals in Galapagos. It's really a matter, having been in Antarctica and even I'm a kayaker now, man, you just stand and wait and let the animals do whatever it is that they want to do. Sometimes they'll come over and plop on your feet. Sometimes they'll look away. And that's why you're not allowed ashore without a naturalist guide, because he's going to tell you exactly what you can and can't do. You can't just go walking around and do whatever you want to do. No food can be taken ashore. Well, you can usually bring water with you from a bottle, but it's very strict. When you go back to the vessels, you even rinse your shoes off, because we don't want to take any sand or any species, say any seeds, from one island to another. No introduced species, my friends. Nada, none. This is one of the most pristine, exquisite places you will ever visit.
Fantastic. We had another question from Gwendolyn asking about whether they can speak and understand English there.
Oh gosh, yeah. Here's one of the things, absolutely. And in order to be a naturalist guide, you saw Boli and Alex there. Here's how it works. The Galapagos are highly regulated. And it's kind of like other things in the world. Like my mom used to say to me, pay peanuts, get monkeys, but the better people tend to work for the better companies. When you go out to dinner, naturally, you're going to get better service and someone more experienced at Ruth's Chris than you're going to get at the Golden Corral. But at the Galapagos Islands, there's a very high standard. And in order to become a naturalist guide there, you have to be a naturalist guide 3. That means you have a university education, and that is at least a bachelor's degree in science. You are bilingual in Spanish and English. That doesn't mean you're functional in English. That means you're bilingual in English. That means when it comes to talking about the names of the creatures and all of those weird things that you and I wouldn't know, they speak that in English and in Spanish. They don't just get by in English. They're fully fluent in the scientific of their language as well. You can't just show up and go, hi, I'm a guide in the Galapagos. You earn your way. So you always know you're going to have a high standard of guide. But like anywhere else, people like us know things that travelers don't know. And that's when you got to do your homework. Some companies are better than others. The naturalist guides and the crews work on the better boats where they are fed better, where they're treated better. Sometimes that costs a few bucks, and you know what? So worth it.
I believe it. Okay, so you mentioned a few different amounts of time to spend.
Oh, yeah.
So
tough call, because one man's nightmare is another man's paradise. I personally think if you're going to go that far, down to Quito, Guayaquil, and you're going to go over, you're going to have a certain amount of sunk costs. Now, I know people that have done like a 5-day Galapagos and then done Machu Picchu for a week, and you work things out that way. Here's the rub, and I'm gonna take the screen back. Can I do that?
Yeah, let me stop sharing.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why, because I want to go back to the map. You can see that with the map, and here's why. When we look at Galapagos in the map, so if you come in,
we're not seeing your screen.
Ah, bugger. Let me try that again. There, you will now. Goes to show I can't. There, are you seeing it now, the map?
Yes.
Okay, good. Here's why. Your flight comes in 2 places. Baltra, let's just for sake of argument, your flight comes into Baltra. How much can you do in 5 days? You're going to get down to your boat in Puerto Vallarta in Santa Cruz. If you only go for 5 days, you're going to go where every Joe goes. You're going to be able to get to Rábida. You might be able to get around Santiago, maybe over to San Cristobal, but that's it. You're going to have to get back to get your flight and leave again. It's like going to Florida and going to Orlando for 5 days. You don't have time to go to Miami. You got to focus on that area there. So give yourself a week. You take a week, guess what? You can go around Isabella. You can go to Fernandina, Santiago, Bartholomew. With 4 or 5 days, you can't do that. People worry about seasickness. It's not really a big issue. These boats are a little bit small. You're usually doing at least 2 landings a day. It's rarely rough here. I just don't think that's really I never ran into that as a really big concern. What I did do a lot of down here, though, were families. Because boats, 8, 16 people, families and friends come down here and charter. So length of time, tough to say. You come down and you only got 4 or 5 nights, fine. You can still make a party out of it, but you're not going to get that Western side.
Well, and Jennifer, to your point, when you're planning these types of bucket list trips, at least a third of your costs a lot of times end up being the airfare. So if you're at this part of the world, enjoy it.
It's sunk cost. Yeah, you really point really well made. And I think that's where you got to look. I used to say to people, they're going to go to Europe for a week. I'm like, seriously, your flight's going to be $1,000 whether you stay a week, 2, 3. It's up to you, run your life, but the heck, and then check another week on down here. It's not hard to get around, but don't kid yourself. Availability is not all over the place. So, I know it's a weird world right now, but I worked here and was very involved in Galapagos right after 9/11. And we were very shortly after 9/11 booking 3 years out. Couldn't get space.
Yeah, there's been a couple other questions. Jonathan wanted to know if there's a hurricane stormy season, and then Gina wanted to know status on Ecuador. I know right now South America is shut down with the COVID. They're still very much struggling. Costa Rica, Central America, but I want to address the stormy season.
Well, once again, if you, being a history and a bit of a geography buff, pull out your maps and take a look at the world maps. And tropical storms tend to focus on tropical areas. I live in Florida. We're significantly further north. We have all of those warm waters. Ecuador has very cold waters. They may be right on the equator, so they their waters are not warm enough to have a hurricane season. So they have what's called a garua season, Garua, which basically is fog.
Yeah.
And the fog sits in the morning and it burns off by 10 o'clock. But that part of the world, fortunately, isn't really affected by it. And I saw someone, Laura, is Jennifer also a travel agent? No, I'm not. I was born and raised in Canada. I worked on cruise ships 18 years. I've been a business development manager for a multitude of companies professionally until April 1st of this year. So international expeditions, Africa, Antarctica, South America, but I kind of know my stuff. So I like to work. I thrive in opportunities to be able to share these places with you, but I'm unemployed. If you could help me find a job, that'd be okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, right now, the travel industry is in a great depression because of, it's 10% of the world's gross domestic product. And unfortunately, because of COVID, it's the entire world is shut down. So a lot of, yeah, I know, right? Amen. We're returning to travel soon.
I mean, I've been in this business all my life. I've never worked in any other, and certainly what we're all experiencing now is like unprecedented. But I was involved with Galapagos after 9/11, and I do believe that substance-driven travel, places like Galapagos, like Antarctica, like Africa, like the Arctic, really will do very well.
Yeah.
We need soul providing substance driven places. And I think you will find it in these spots.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the status of the country, I'm not going to say I know what's happening, whether the borders are open, whether you need a test to get in, whether you don't or not. Frankly, at this point in time, I can't fathom anybody really thinking about plunking any money seriously down until after Thanksgiving this year, when we know what's happening out there.
Yeah.
And it changes week by week, and none of us are in control of it. But I reckon, I guess, there'll be a nice little proper stampede.
Yeah, we're going to travel and record it all and put it on my blog. We're going to the Maldives, my husband and I. The end of October, first week of November. So people are returning to travel. Countries are opening up again. It's just a slow roll, and every government is different, and we've got to follow whatever their lead is, quite frankly. So
I think that as someone said to me before, travelers are beginning to travel.
Right.
Tourists are waiting to see what's going to happen.
Right.
That's a really great way to explain it.
Yeah.
Jonathan asked one more question about when is foggy season?
November, December, January, if my memory is serving me correctly. And I knew that when I threw it out. I thought, dang it, it's gone out of my head. But the Garua season, the fog, it's actually not a bad thing. It's kind of like when you're out snorkeling or doing activities and you get that cloud in the sky, because you're on the equator and you can get crisp really fast.
Right.
And folks really aren't sensitive of it. And the naturalist guides are anal about it. They'll make sure people are covered in their long sleeve shirts and stuff. But it's more of a busy season. The temperatures, especially the water temperature, just doesn't change because Mother Nature is constant with that current.
Great.
But there is some stuff again on I know and you're going to record this as well, but even up on Jennifer Reynolds Travels, there's some stuff up on YouTube and on the Facebook channel. There's so many great places to go.
I think Maria just put it in the chat. So those of you that are on the call live, you can just scroll through the chat box and grab some of those links. And you've been so generous again with your time, Jennifer. I just can't thank you enough for coming on.
Thrilled. Thanks for asking me, and we'll see you in 2 weeks because we got to go to Peru.
Yes.
Yeah. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to save the chat where we have the link for Jennifer Reynolds Travel, as well as where you can find us with Take a Virtual Vacation, there are 3 dots in the bottom right-hand corner of the chat. And if you click on that, you should see a box that says Save Chat pop up. You can save that chat and refer back. Otherwise, we hope you will join us at the Facebook group, Take a Virtual Vacation, and we will see you next time.
Thanks
again, everybody.
Bye, everybody.